Hi, welcome to Red Door Conversations, Real Talk and Realty. I am Marla Lewis and I'm here with my lovely co-host. I've got Miss Tana Young.
Hello, everyone.
And Miss Lisa White.
How y'all doing?
And also Miss Kimberly Dixon Dudley. How's it going, ladies?
Hey,
Wonderful.
wonderful. Ready for this show?
Great. Yes, I'm ready to
Yes.
have the show today. So guys, today we're going to be talking real estate and probate. So, you might say, what is probate? I'll give you the simple definition. And the simple definition of probate is just the official approval of a will. That's what it means. So we're going to be talking about that today. You may want to make sure that you pick up the phone and call someone because this is a juicy topic. This is a topic that every family member or friend could use. So go ahead, pick up the phone, call somebody, let them know that you are watching Red Door Conversations. They need to tune in as well. But we're going to take a quick commercial break and we will be right back to dive right into real estate and probate. See you soon. Welcome back to Red Door Conversations. Thank you for staying with us. Today we are diving into the juicy but much needed topic of real estate and probate. Yes.
Real estate and probate. And today we have a guest on. I'm going to introduce my guest here with my co-host. It's Sylvester Williams. Sylvester Williams is both my go-to real estate attorney and the title attorney for Secure Title of Texas. This guy knows what he's talking about, so you're going to want to pay attention to him. He is going to give us all the details as it relates to real estate and probate. I'll just share a little bit about his background so you know why he is our guest on the show.
Why he can keep you out of trouble.
There we go.
Yes.
There we go.
That's what I
There we
need them
go.
to know. That's what, hey, he
Yeah.
can keep you out of trouble.
Yes.
Absolutely.
and help to get that will in order.
That's
Oh,
it.
yes. Okay, so Sylvester considers himself to be more than an attorney. He considers himself to be an entrepreneur, a solutions-oriented leader in his space. He practices real estate, but it oftentimes crosses over into probate. And so in addition to his law practice, he's an investor, and he says most of his lessons learned have been through real life transactions. So you get an opportunity to learn from his experience and his knowledge. Sylvester's from Chattanooga, Tennessee. I didn't know that. And
Yes.
yeah, and he is an alumni of Florida A&M. Go Rattlers.
Okay.
That's it. HBCU.
Yes, that's right,
Yes.
HBCU. And Sylvester worked in oil and gas prior to attending South Texas College of Law part-time. After graduating, he left law school and went into corporate America, then left corporate America to focus specifically on law. And Sylvester, if you can see his background, he has a beautiful San Francisco background, but he is actually based in San Diego. So I'll share that. So we office together. So we office at Secure Title of Texas here locally, but Sylvester is the mover and shaker. He likes to travel. That's one of his hobbies.
Okay.
He's a fitness enthusiast. You're looking good, Sylvester. I like that.
I see those guns.
Right.
Hey, no doubt.
Way to stay fit in the pandemic.
Way to stay fit during the pandemic.
Hey, that's our next song.
But so you're a fitness enthusiast and a foodie at the same time, so you balance it out. I see. Very well. Good.
Kind of have balance, yin and the game.
Okay. And he enjoys spending time with his mini-me, his beautiful daughter. So I'll wrap up the summary there, and then we'll jump right into the show because this is
Absolutely.
information you definitely
Yes.
want to get directly from the horse's mouth. Our legal expert, Sylvester Williams.
All right.
So Sylvester.
Thanks for having me, Kim.
Yeah, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for taking time to join us. Marla gave us at the beginning of the show the general description of what probate means. But we want you to give us the real legal description and tell our viewers
Okay.
and listeners why it's even important for them to know what probate means.
Okay, so probate, given the boring legal definition, is the process in which courts legally recognize a person deaths and oversees the payments of the deceased person's debts and also this distribution of their assets. And so the reason everybody needs to know about probate is, if your parents own a house, if they have a bank account, any assets or anything else, you have to start this process in order to handle their affairs. And a lot of times people don't have a plan in place. And what happens is they try to go sell a house, and all of a sudden, guess what? They can't close on it.
So if say for instance, I have a will, and let me ask you this: does a will have to be notarized in order for it to be considered legal?
So Texas is a funny state. A will, if it's in the person's handwriting, it does not have to be notarized. So that's what we call a holographic will. So a person can literally just write out a will on a sheet of notebook paper, sign it, and that is actually a valid will in Texas. And long as they have two witnesses that can attest to that being their signature, you can actually have that will proved in court, and they will follow the directions of the will. But there's a couple of other methods with the will where a will does require two witnesses. And so that will does have to be notarized in order for it to be a valid will in Texas. And so what that means is sometimes you have these instances where, let's say somebody tells you to say, hey, Kim, can you write out my will for me and I'll just sign it? That does not count. That would not work.
Yeah, and I would say I can see that being an issue.
For like older people
Yeah.
whose handwriting may not be
change,
clear.
Yeah, clear, and then, it can change, and I would certainly want to go with just having two witnesses and having it notarized and everything else.
Sylvester, can you tell our viewers what does probate involve and when it is necessary? What does it involve and when is it necessary?
Okay, so that really all depends upon if the person has a will or does not have a will. But I would say it typically starts with the process of, if you have a will, then within 4 years of that person's death, you need to file that will to actually have the estate probated. Something what happens often at times is people wait too long. And so, for example, you'll have somebody where year number 7, they're trying to sell that house that we talked about, or either they say, hey, my mom and dad gave me that house in the will, but guess what? 7 years have passed, and you find out it has 6 other siblings. And so it's very important that you probate the will within 4 years of that person's death. Once you actually file the will with the court, that initiates application to probate the will, then that begins the probate process. In Texas, there's a number of different ways that you can probate an estate. And so depending upon what assets that family has, there's a solution for each party, because just to try to be quick. So for example, let's say real estate is the only asset there. Then they have where you can probate a will, mean a title. And so that's a much shorter, easier process. And they don't have to go through filing an inventory. They don't have to do an accounting. There's a lot of other steps that you don't have to do. And then also, let's say there's only one heir. Then, some people elect not even to do probate. They can just go with the affidavit of heirship and just attach a copy of the will. Then you also have a small estate affidavit as well. So Texas gives you numerous options on how to handle probate, but you just need to, ideally in a perfect world, if there is a will, there's multiple heirs, you need to probate within that 4-year time period to avoid any issues. Or as I always like to say, make sure you're carrying out the deceased wishes.
What happens if a family misses the 4-year window to probate a will?
If the family misses the 4-year window, then you can run into, there's 1 or 2 things that can happen. One, if all the family members agree, you can still actually probate the will. The courts, there is a rule where the courts can make an exception. And so if the family members agree, because you do have to have all the family members, like for example, even people not named in the will, because every now and then, let's say you have 5 siblings, 4 of them are named in the will, they try to disinherit one of the kids. All 5 have to sign for you to probate after that 4 years. The other thing that some people do is they just ignore the will and just pretend as if they died without a will, where it passes through intestate secession. So essentially that'd be like dying without a will. So those are really the 2 outcomes. And, depending upon the access of the estate, and I always like to say family dynamics are huge. If the family's blown up, then it creates a whole additional challenge because, like I said, if you're the number 5 kid that got left out the will, you're not going to agree with the will.
Sylvester, I want you to hold that thought. We're going to commercial break, guys. You stay right there.
Welcome back to Red Door Conversation, guys. Now, before we took a break, Sylvester, you was telling us what does probate involve and when it's necessary.
So probate, I think, is really necessary when there are assets left in the estate and the children are either trying to transfer them, they're trying to sell them, they need access to a bank account. I would probably say most families, some people say, well, mama didn't have anything or dad didn't have anything, but there's typically always something there left. And so that's when it's really necessary, and especially if there's a piece of real estate involved, because probate and real estate, they cross each other all the time.
Now, Sylvester, I do have a question for you. Is it always necessary to probate a will in order for the property to sell?
It is not always necessary to have a probate. Texas is one of the few states where you can actually use what's called an affidavit of heirship. And so that's pretty much where it's an affidavit where it can be a family member or 2 additional witnesses, and they're pretty much stating the facts of the death, the family history, and most title companies are okay with this being used in place of a will, I should say, in place of the estate actually being probated. That is actually often of times sufficient. So there's not a lot of assets, it's just a piece of real estate. An affidavit of heirship is a way to avoid probate. And then also, people who actually plan out, there's what they call a transfer on death deed, or also known as a ladybird deed. And so this is a document where your mom or dad or family member can actually deed the property over to you, but it only happens upon your death. And so at that point in time as well, title companies will just want to see a death certificate, and you just do a basic affidavit. So those are a couple of ways where you don't even have to involve probate. And then also when property is actually placed in a trust. Most people think that trust mean it has to be a high net worth individual. That's not always true. I think everybody should really sit down with an estate planning attorney and actually have those conversations.
Now, I have a question,
good.
Sylvester. That was really good information. I'm taking notes here. If someone dies without a will, can the surviving spouse still sell the property without any issues, as long as the only children they have together are together, not any outside children?
So they will still need an affidavit of heirship to avoid having the probate estate. So it will still go back to them needing an affidavit of heirship, because a lot of people do think that it automatically transferred to the surviving spouse, but that is not true. And that sometimes creates a mess later on down the road, because a lot of times the story you hear is, well, when my dad died, I thought my mom had all the house, and now you have the brother and sister, and some of them have kids, and one brother may have died. And so it's always best to see what happens. So when a person dies, people should always consult an attorney, period.
So let me ask you a question about that heirship affidavit. In the case of, so let's say there's 6 children, and you're trying to sell a property and you can only find 5 of those 6. How do you handle that?
So that's a very tricky situation. You need to find that 6th kid. There's a lot of skip trace services and everything else, and you'll have to utilize those resources to try to find that. And there are a lot of deals, because I deal with a number of deals involving heirs, and we have hunted down and found the people. It takes a very long time, but that goes to show you why probate is so important, because at least you have one child appointed, which most people appoint a responsible child, let's just call it what it is, to take care of the affairs. And that way, if that one child disappears, they don't have to hunt them down. They can just technically hold that 6th child's share or place it into the court registry.
Got it. Okay. I want to get this question in before we have to go as well. What happens if someone is mishandling the estate? Is there anything that can be done?
So there is absolutely something that can be done. And so the first thing is, technically, if you notice that person isn't doing what's in the will, or they aren't doing what they're supposed to according to the court, then you need to contact an attorney, and they have procedures in place to where you can have that person removed from the estate. Now, they do get what I call their fair day in court to prove if they are or are not handling affairs properly. But if they are not handling affairs properly, then they can be removed, and the court will either appoint the next person named in the will. If there's not a person named in the will, then the court can appoint someone else to serve as administrator, and that person will be removed.
Very
That's
good
stuff.
information.
Did you guys have anything else you wanted to ask Sylvester?
Yes, I have so many questions. I'm sitting here, you guys taking notes. Yes, you guys are watching. I'm just taking notes, writing things down, because this is just good information for us
Absolutely.
as
Mhm.
professionals in the real estate industry.
That's
I
right.
mean,
Yeah.
we have people. In fact,
I
today
had a buyer
I'm
selling
meeting
like
with
that.
yes, I'm meeting with clients of a gentleman who told me that when he passes, he wanted me to sell his home. I'm meeting with his sons
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
today, and so I am taking
Is he on
so
his
many
deathbed?
notes.
Or he's
He
just
has
proper
passed
plan?
away.
Oh, okay.
He has passed away.
Okay.
He did have a will,
Okay.
Okay.
but he and I discussed some things. See, this is
Prior to his
stuff-
death.
Wow,
Yes.
this is
Oh,
why
wow.
this show is so it's so
it's
important.
so important,
Yeah,
and people
yeah.
don't realize how much the two
Go together.
intertwine
Yeah,
and
right.
cross over, and you know, so we have to know all of this stuff. So do I have questions? I have plenty of questions. One of the questions that I want to ask you is, you mentioned intestate secession. I don't know what
Yes.
that is. What is that?
So intestate succession is for when a person dies without a will. And so at that point in the Texas code, there is essentially a process for how they distribute out the estate. And so I always tell people, if you want to keep the court out your business, have a will. If you have a plan in place, make sure the court follows it, because otherwise that controls. And so that's where it can get very messy, especially for people who remarry, where both people have kids from previous relationships. It can get very messy when people start dying off and you're going down to great grandchildren and everything else. And so you do not want the courts to decide ultimately who gets it based upon the code, because it gets very messy. And then, like I tell people, you're drawing out a family tree of 25 people when it could have been very simple, and it could have been addressed when the person died versus 20, 30 years later.
I think it's so interesting
That
how
happened with my
celebrities who have access to so many planning
Yeah.
professionals, and you know, they will have all these assets and die without a will.
That's the
Absolutely.
craziest
You know, you would
thing ever.
think you
Yeah.
think like I'm not gonna name anybody on air, but
Right.
obviously
Yeah.
you would
It
just
happens.
think
To
that
put it together.
you'd have years to get these things in place.
Yes.
And I guess we all think we have
The
time.
time.
Yeah,
That's
forever,
it. The
forever.
time. The time. And the thing about it is, guys, I mean, for me, these questions, while we have him here, you know, it's just, I'm so glad to have him here. Because many
Absolutely.
times we think that, you know, or we've heard,
Right.
this is the way that it's going to go and things of that nature. He mentioned about, you know, if there are outside children, things of that nature. And many people believe that, you know, oh, my parent owned this home and they remarried, but my parent left, you know, my
House to me.
parent left the house
That's
to
not the
me.
case.
So what happens with that spouse? And so I've had to deal with things like that within my business as well.
Yeah.
Sylvester, you want to touch on that just briefly?
Hold that
so,
thought, hold that
I mean,
thought,
the biggest-
Sylvester. Hold that thought. We have to go to a commercial break. We will be
Okay.
right back.
2, 1.
Hey guys, welcome back to Red Door Conversations. Glad you didn't touch that dial. We're about to get out of here, but before we do, we want Sylvester Williams to tell you what projects he has cooking up. Sylvester, take it away.
So right now I have what I call a course I'm putting together, and it's really what I call a standard operating procedure. Every single family should have one, and I went with the name standard operating procedure because when people think of estate planning, they automatically think of death. It has like a negative connotation to it. But when you think about a standard operating procedure, every company has one, and so should every family. And so you should know what happens if something happens to mom, if something happens to dad, if if the brother outlives the sister, what happens to your kid far as schooling. Every family should know what to do. And I always tell people, there's also these tough decisions you have to make. Your kids may not want to do the business that you're in. Your kids may not want to keep the rental properties, but guess what? That needs to be in your standard operating procedure. And that's something that can be handed off to, I would say, your kids. It can be handed off to your other relatives, and they can pick it up and go ahead and tackle these things, because too often or not, the main trigger for people to start anything with probate is, oh, these taxes are past due. Oh, I keep getting these bills.
Okay, and where can they find that?
Okay, so that will be available at swilliamsassociates.com. That will be on my website, and that will be listed under education materials.
Thank you so much, Mr. Williams, for joining us. We have thoroughly enjoyed you, and
Good show.
great show, guys. We got to get out of here. You have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining Red Door Conversations, and we'll see you next time.